All right, we are live, and welcome. Welcome to the OCP Modern Workplace Productivity U.S. Partner Community Call for May. And looking forward to sharing the content today. And I've got a couple of folks from Microsoft, and I just want to apologize for the little speaker avatar down there. I'm going to work on that throughout the meeting and try to get rid of that. So if that just gets in the way of some of the slides, I want to just apologize in advance. But anyway, our agenda today, we're going to talk about Attack Simulator, which just went GA. We have Stu Clark with us. He is a principal program manager here at Microsoft. And then Nick Robinson is going to take us through the new data privacy tab and going through the fulfillment of data subject requests. So fortunate to have them both here. Very timely stuff we're talking about today. And you got here, so that's great. And so you figured out how to join our calls. And just in case you're not aware of some of the other resources, you can always get all of the events listed for our community at some of the AKA vanity URLs there. Hot Sheet News will get you all of the upcoming training events and these meetings that are scheduled as part of the community. And then we have the Yammer community where this deck will be posted after the call. And so you can go ahead to the MW partner community to get on. We're just about to hit the 3,000 mark on the number of partners there. And so there's a lot of good partner-to-partner sharing and good information that comes in the announcements for these calls. So I encourage you to participate in that. And we also have the US blog, aka.ms US blog, where you can get some blogs and also other important partner announcements from all of our communities in the US here for just for partners. All right, well, that's my public service announcement. And Stu Clark, you with us?
I am, yes. Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi, good morning, Stu. So thanks for joining us, and we're glad to have you here today. And we just recently went GA with Attack Simulator, and how has the response been so far?
It's been super good, better than we expected, which is great. We had a lot of feedback in terms of kind of some improvements we would like to make. So we're feverishly kind of working through those at the moment, but the reception's been really, really good. We've kind of seen the volume of attacks that tenants have been running is kind of way over 3,000 at the moment. So kind of we've seen a really good kind of uptake on it. So we're just going to kind of continually kind of enhance the feature and add to it now. So what I'm going to do for this call is kind of give you a quick overview of Attack Simulator, kind of tell you what shipped, what the value prop around it. So from a partner perspective, how we're positioning this tool as part of kind of the overall threat intelligence and threat management experience. I'll kind of briefly touch on what's available in the product today, and then we'll kind of have a quick chat about kind of what's coming up next. If we get time and I can figure out how we can do it over the event builder thing, I will do a quick demo, but kind of no promises on that, but we should be good. So, but that's where I'm going to start, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, that sounds great. I can see you're taking over presenter, which is well, and you should be able to go ahead and demo and just be like our regular Skype meeting while everybody watches on the screen. On the stream, and so looking forward to what you have to share today. And I've been telling partners that this is a good opportunity maybe to include that as part of their security assessment, and this is going to be an ongoing thing, right? Because passwords will change over time, and it's something that they can continually run month over month. Would you agree?
Totally, absolutely, yeah. And I can talk through some of the detail through that as we go.
Okay, great.
So let's kind of kick off. So for those of you who don't know, Attack Simulator was released to GA at the start of RSA on April the 16th. It's part of the threat management suite that is part of the Security Compliance Center. So it's available for if you're an E5 customer, you get it, or if you've bought the standalone TI SKU, you get it as well. We took the decision to integrate it into threat management and threat intelligence because it kind of gives customers a really kind of good end-to-end coverage. So as you know, kind of in threat management, we have things like the Explorer and the dashboard where you can kind of look at live threats that are happening against your environment. You can kind of explore those relationships. And what we then thought about, the good positioning for this was then being able to run attacks against those individuals within your organization. So you can easily see at the moment who are your top targeted recipients in terms of who's getting the most ransomware sent to them, who's getting the most malware sent to them. Let's go and simulate against these people with a variety of different attacks. So basically help educate the end user and educate the tenant admins who work in the SecAdmin and SecOps space in terms of signals they should be looking for with these attacks. There's one important kind of thing we want to kind of pitch with this is that we're not going head to head with kind of FishMe or KnowBe4 or Wombat or anybody like that with this tooling. We offer 3 kind of attacks out of the gate. Those companies tend to specialize in phishing, which we kind of fully get is a complete and utter legitimate threat scenario. But what we want to do is kind of pile on top of that, because at no point ever did anybody launch a phishing attack against an organization and then run off into the sunset. There is always a sequence of follow-up attacks that happen, and typically a phishing campaign, be it credential harvest or malware, is part of what we call a kill chain. And in a kill chain, you'll typically see the initial foot in, there'll be some elevation of privilege work, and there'll be some data exfiltration work. So the long-term aim with Attack Simulator is to let you chain attacks together. So you can start with a phishing campaign. Based on the results from the phishing campaign, it will do a password spray. Based on the bit of feedback there. Oh, there we go. Thank you. And then based on the results from each subsequent attack, it will kind of keep on drilling to let you drive through. So that's where the ultimate aim of the tool is itself. Now, the tool itself lets you run incredibly accurate attacks and realistic attacks against your end users. Several reasons we want customers to be doing this. We know from our kind of support data that customers are being targeted all the time. And so a lot of our thinking is if you know you're being attacked, you should really be attacking yourself. Mainly because you don't want the first time that you're working out how to deal with an attack to be the first time you are under attack. So this will kind of let you test your responses, test your admin responses, test your end user responses. So we kind of want to give you the opportunity to kind of test those responses on your terms. The attacks that we offer, we're shipping with 3, which is a credential harvest phishing attack, a password spray attack, and a brute force attack. We're going to be continually adding the number of attacks as we go through kind of the next 6 months. So we're going to be adding in a data exfiltration attack. We're going to be adding in an attachment-based phishing attack. We're going to be adding in an instant messaging-based phishing attack. So all of the attacks that we see in the wild today through our own kind of threat intel feeds and what customers are reporting, ultimately we're going to have an attack for within this tool itself. So you can then kind of start to do that testing itself. So as I mentioned, so we've shipped with 3 attacks. The phishing payload is a credential harvester. We've done a lot of work in terms of, like, for the phishing scenarios, has a rich HTML editor, so you can kind of craft very realistic looking attacks. We're just about to ship templates. So the tool itself shipped with 2 phishing templates for a prize giveaway and a payroll giveaway. We're about to ship in the next couple of weeks the template editor, which will basically let you create your own templates and edit them. So once you've kind of created that kind of perfect phishing mail that you're really happy with, that's kind of themed around an organization or a particular kind of technology trend, you'll be able to kind of save those templates and reuse them as time goes on. We do have a requirement that MFA is enabled on the tenant admin account to launch the attacks. And the reason behind that is purely because this thing is so realistic, we do need some kind of gate in there to make sure that kind of like not every single admin can kind of use this within their organization. We have a Microsoft recommendation anyway that says all tenant admins should have MFA enabled. So we've positioned it in that space. The other thing that's worth calling out is how we do the mail delivery for the phishing attack. So companies like FishMe, Wombat, KnowBe4, so they rely on transport to do the message delivery. We don't. We do direct injection into the mailbox, so we completely bypass the transport stack. Now, the reason we do that is that we don't want to test the technology. We don't want to be testing ATP. We don't want to be testing EOP. We don't want to be kind of testing various third-party email protection services because we want to test the end user. So we want to guarantee that that email is going to land in that end user's mailbox. So we use this direct injection method to do that. And as I mentioned, it only works for cloud mailboxes. So if you're in a hybrid environment, it will actually only work for a mailbox that is actually based in the cloud itself. Now that's for phishing attacks. Now if you're doing a password spray attack or you're doing a password brute force attack and the customer is using ADFS, Federation Services, when we're proxying auth back on-prem, those type of attacks will work for hybrid customers within that particular environment. So as I touched on earlier, we have some advanced templates landing in June. We have some advanced reporting landing in July, and we have some attachment attacks landing in August, and then we've got a roadmap that kind of sees us through to the end of the year where we're going to kind of be adding in these additional attacks. Reporting is the big thing. At the moment, our reporting is pretty basic. We just kind of show you some text of kind of what time a person clicked on a link and what time a person kind of entered their credentials. The reporting that's landing in July is going to offer a rich set of visualizations that can be exported. That's going to show things like fastest time to click, fastest time to credentials, what was the overall success rate of the campaign itself, and kind of give some rich visuals around that in terms of some historic line graphs kind of showing how the attack trended, and then some kind of pie charts showing the various success rates of each phase of the attack itself. So obviously, I touched on phishing is kind of super relevant for us, but it's not the only kind of scenario we worry about. So one thing to bear in mind with the attacks that are in the tool, at Microsoft, we run a lot of internal red team pen tests against the infrastructure. So every attack that we're kind of releasing within the tool is basically one that's come from our red team that they've used successfully. So they're kind of one of the drivers on. These are the techniques that they use with success against Microsoft that kind of we want to offer out to our kind of customers and partners to use. I mean, the internal kind of name for the project was Red Team in a Box when we were kind of working on this internally. So it's kind of some pretty kind of neat things coming from those. And on the screen here are just kind of some of the examples of the kind of messages that you can kind of create with the tool. So one of the things that the tool gives you the ability to do, because we directly inject these messages, you can completely spoof internal or external messages. So you can, if you type in when you're kind of crafting the email, and I'll kind of show you this in the UI, if you put in the sender of the phishing email as a mailbox that exists within your organization, it will actually resolve that mailbox. So when the target receives that email, it will actually look like it has come from an internal user within the organization, which is kind of one of the big trust gateways immediately shut down. Now, the reason we do that is that we've seen a huge uptick in that type of attack, where typically we think as phishing as coming from an external source that comes through, and the technology nowadays is kind of pretty good at kind of identifying those spoofed emails. Outlook will kind of show you it's from an external address, and you can kind of pretty easily see. But what we've seen a huge uptick in is bad actors compromising a single mailbox in a tenant and then using that mailbox as basically the launch point for their kind of phishing campaign. So in all intents and purposes, they're sending emails as if they have come from an internal recipient, where they have come from an internal recipient. And again, that immediately kind of removes one of the big trust barriers that people have when they're kind of looking at these various attachments. So what I want to kind of quickly do now, I've kind of given you the quick walkthrough, is kind of give you a quick demo of the tool itself. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can someone just confirm to me that we can see my screen okay before I start yabbering on even further?
Yes, it's coming through in our Skype meeting. It should be coming through the stream in just a couple of seconds. Yep, here it comes.
Okay, cool. So as I mentioned, it sits in the Security Compliance Center itself, and it lives underneath threat management. So if you expand the threat management menu, you'll see the usual tools, Dashboard Explorer, and we now have one in here called Attack Simulator. And if we go to Attack Simulator, we basically land on the main page for the tool itself. And here is where we show you the initial attack. So as I mentioned, we've got 3 attacks. We have a spear phishing credential harvest, we have a brute force, and we have a password spray attack. Each attack is driven by a wizard in terms of setting the attack up. So to kind of kick off with a phishing attack, we literally click on launch attack, and it kind of takes us to the campaign creation wizard. So you have the option here to basically start from scratch and create your brand new campaign, however you configured, or you can use a template. So as I mentioned earlier, we have this concept of templates where you can kind of create your predefined templates that you want to use in the environment. And a template is basically the entire phishing campaign kind of pre-crafted and ready to go, but you can still go in there and make some edits. So for this one, I will just kind of do a prize giveaway, because it's a kind of nice, simple one for us to take a look at. We then kind of walk through the wizard, and the next thing we're asked to do is basically kind of select who we want the victims to be, or the targets. So in this case here, I'm going to pick this guy here, Heiko, because I know he clicks on absolutely everything. We kind of then walk through the wizard, and we start to talk about the details of the attack itself. So the display name of who we want the message to come from, the email address of who we want the email to appear as who it's come from, the logon server URL. So this is the URL that will be injected into the mail itself and will then be hopefully kind of clicked on by the victim, which is where we take them to do the credential harvest. And then the custom landing page URL. So this one's pretty important. So by default, if you don't fill this field in, we just drop you the victim of a successful attack who enters their credentials. We drop them on like a standard custom, very simple landing page that kind of says, congratulations, you've just been part of a phishing awareness campaign and you fell for it. Here are some kind of safety tips to kind of help keep you safe online. What this custom landing page URL lets customers do is basically, if they already have internal training on their intranet or somebody else or somewhere else, they can specify that URL here. And then when a victim does fall for the attack, the victim will be redirected to the customer's training environment that they have already. So a lot of large organizations already have a pretty extensive kind of security awareness and training and education infrastructure. We give customers the ability to kind of land on that particular page in their organization. And we just have the subject. So once we're happy with that, we just kind of click next and we go through. And then we kind of get to the crafting the email body itself. So we kind of give you 2 views. We have a rich text HTML editor that kind of lets you bold, underline. You can kind of take a look at the source HTML itself. So if you're more comfortable crafting HTML and you just want to do it that way, we kind of give you the option. So once you're kind of happy with the general look and feel, we click on next, and then we just prompted, do we want to kind of finish the attack itself? And then that basically launches the attack. So that attack is now going off. It gets processed by Azure at the back end, and it then kind of kicks off the job to basically kind of inject that mail into the inboxes itself. So I can see here the prize giveaway partner is the latest attack I've run, and I'm given the option to go and view that report directly. While I'm on this page, before we kind of go and look at the mailbox, if we look in the attack details, what we show you here is this is like the history of all the attacks that you've run underneath this kind of particular scenario. So for this spear phishing credential harvest, these are all of the attacks that we've run. So we can see here, prize giveaway partner. No users have been compromised yet because we've not yet gone into the mailbox. And here's some kind of further tests from earlier on that we've run. And as I mentioned, this is where we also have the phishing template. So in here, you can go and create a new template. Your existing templates, you can edit or delete them for kind of however long you want it to kind of appear. So that's kind of like the UI itself. Now, what does this look like from a client perspective? So as you can see, the mail I sent is kind of instantaneously delivered. It's this top one here, prize giveaway. The victim now kind of clicks on this. He kind of sees it's the display name is what we put in the message. It's from that prizes for all, which for this one is rendering as an external address. And then we kind of have the content that we actually placed in. So this guy here, oh, this looks interesting. I'm going to click on the link. First thing he does, he clicks on the link and he basically gets a cloned Microsoft logon page for O365. So kind of being the smart man he is, he kind of goes in and kind of enters his details. We then kind of want him to obviously put in his password. he hits sign in, and he then gets dumped on this generic congratulations page. You've just won absolutely nothing. So this is the default page you get if you haven't specified your custom landing URL. So if when we had crafted that attack, we had put in a different URL, such as Bing or an internet site, the victim would have been redirected to that site at that particular moment in order to kind of view the appropriate kind of training and education that we kind of wanted to put in front of them. So that's kind of what it looks like from the end user's perspective. So obviously now we've kind of gone through, we've run the test, and we want to kind of look through and kind of see the details. So what we show you in the reporting at the moment is basically we show you what time the message was sent, how many total users we targeted, how many successful attempts we have, and then on a per user basis, we kind of call out, okay, this particular user here, he clicked on the link at this time, and he then entered his credentials at this time. So this is the bit I mentioned as we go through July. This will kind of be replaced with a kind of much richer UI reporting experience with the visuals, and we will allow you to kind of export that data out into a PDF or to a CSV so you can kind of consume it elsewhere if you kind of want to suck this kind of data into Power BI, for example. You'll kind of be able to kind of go through and do that experience itself. Okay, so that's really the tool itself. So just to show you kind of, here's the attack we just literally just ran ourselves before. So this is the one that we sent it at 10:20. We sent it to Heiko. He clicked on the link, he being me. I clicked on the link at 10:21 and 35 seconds, and I'd entered my credentials kind of within 20 seconds of that particular date itself. Okay, so that's a real quick overview of the tool itself. In terms of messaging, we're desperately not trying to have a conversation where we're going kind of head to head with some of the third parties in this space, such as comparing kind of Cofence's PhishMe with Attack Simulator. We really kind of want to pivot this around the whole. It's an enhancement to the threat intelligence kind of SKU itself. And it's, as it grows over time, as I mentioned, we're going to kind of give you the ability to kind of start to chain these various attacks together, as well as introducing those new attacks. Okay, so that's the end of me talking on. I hope that was useful.
Yeah, very useful. Great information and a lot of updates that I know that I wasn't aware of. So we're going to have that's exciting about the different attack types that are coming up. So we have the attachment based, the IM based, and what was the other one that you mentioned? I missed that one.
We're going to be in data exfiltration. So there's some of the things we want to look at, because again, we'll typically see someone will do a phish, they'll do a password spray, and then they'll then try and do elevation of privilege using something like MS Graph to find out who the kind of administrators are and kind of grant themselves appropriate permissions. Then ultimately the goal is typically to get something from the organization, and data exfiltration can kind of mean monetary exfiltration. It can actually mean kind of sensitive commercial data exfiltration. So we want to give you the ability to do that. And that's when we move into the realm of kind of testing the SecOps team. So let's, for example, say we run a campaign where we simulate exporting 3 gigabytes worth of sensitive data out of a tenant. You would hope that your SecAdmin or your SecOps would notice that. So kind of classic spear phishing is an end user attack. We want to introduce the attacks into here that hopefully we're testing the SecAdmins, the guys kind of within the tenant who are responsible for kind of securing the castle, as it were. So the attack kind of education will pivot to cover both scenarios, those pre-breach scenarios where the end user is typically the target, and the post-breach scenarios where the attacker has some kind of elevation and he's now effectively targeting the admins of the tenant itself.
Great. All right. Cool stuff. Yeah, we have a couple of questions, actually, several coming in. And the first question is, this is kind of interesting. So what kind of expertise is recommended for people creating these attacks? Anything you can think of or comments on that?
So it's kind of tricky. So because it's aimed at the E5 SKU, we're kind of assuming so when we first did it, we didn't have the rich HTML editor, and that was met with complete dismay because we were kind of expecting people to understand HTML in depth and kind of be able to craft quite complex messages itself. For the moment, we feel it's kind of pretty basic in terms of what it does. So the UI itself, by making it into a wizard-driven experience, we're kind of quite confident that you don't need a massively high skill level to pull off one of these attacks. Again, to be honest, it's one of the reasons we've also gated MFA there. Kind of, it's almost too easy. I mean, if you imagine that a tenant admin herself had been compromised, from this tool, they could effectively launch an attack against the organization that you wouldn't be able to tell it's an attack at that particular point. The kind of finesse around these kind of things is kind of really learning out who to target within your organization, because most organizations, so at Microsoft, for example, we do a phishing campaign once a quarter, and we do it to 20,000 people a time when we do it. Most of the skill is really creating the content that's appropriate to your organization. So the most successful phishing campaigns we see are ones that are tailored because they have a theme for your organization. So the most successful ones at Microsoft have always had a theme of, like, claim your free Xbox, or click here to win Seahawks tickets, because anyone in Redmond, if they see the word Seahawks, they go click insane. So a lot of the kind of skill around it is actually crafting the content to be relevant to your organization, be you a financial, be you kind of an environmental or a manufacturing firm. That's where the typical skill comes in, is making that believable template itself.
Very good. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And then another question around, or asking for clarification around the cloud mailboxes. I'm assuming that means that your mailbox is homed and Exchange Online, either cloud only account, or maybe if you have a hybrid that's homed and Exchange Online, is that going to work?
So if the AD account is on-prem, all we need is the mailbox itself. So that's because we direct inject. So we can only direct inject to a mailbox that is housed within the O365 online infrastructure. So the AD account can still be on-prem, and you can be kind of running federated auth, but the physical mailbox itself needs to be in the cloud itself in order for us to deliver that message.
All right, sounds good. And then do these attacks vary when users have different mail clients?
That's something, so again, that's a really good question, actually. So obviously different clients render things in different ways. So again, typically when you are creating a phishing campaign, you will create one and you will just target like an internal test mailbox that you create. And then typically most customers will they'll log into that mailbox via OA to see what it looks like. They will log on via Outlook to see what it looks like, or they will log on via kind of iOS mail client to see what it looks like. And sometimes you do have to make some kind of like various tweaks. So for example, what you can do in HTML, you can do what's called a base 64 encoding of an image. And that basically means that instead of an email having like an attachment with an external hosted image, or the email showing up as an attachment in the email device, it directly embeds the image into the HTML. And different clients render that in different ways. So typically most of our customers go for what is the experience going to look like in an Outlook full-fat client on the desktop. But it is certainly worth doing once you kind of do it. We typically say to customers, create your template, send it to one person, that one person being yourself, and make sure you've got the look and feel kind of correctly in terms of how that individual mail client renders particular HTML elements, because some of them are different to others. That's a good question.
All right. And then John is asking around that first time setup. So, when you get the prompt in order to run it, okay, so for those on the call that haven't set this up, there's a prompt that comes up and it just says we need to set a few things up. Usually takes a few hours. Set up now. And so any comments or insight into what's actually happening? And then if somebody needed to undo that, could they do that?
Yeah, so what's happening is, so basically there's a component of Exchange here at Microsoft called the substrate, which is basically a logical layer of storage that sits across the top of each tenant. Now, the tool itself holds all of the campaign data within the boundary of a particular tenant. So every single tenant has basically what we call a tenant shard, which is basically, it's like one of the old system attendant mailboxes. It's effectively a mailbox, but it's where Exchange and various other components of the service can store configuration data. Now, by default, tenants don't have a tenant shard created. So kind of any app or feature that Microsoft release that is using this kind of in-boundary tenant store, the first time you use it, you have to kind of go through this setup experience where basically it's creating a hidden mailbox within the environment itself. But the mailbox is what we say at the tenant level as opposed to the user level itself. So there's no way to undo it because that's part of the kind of experience itself. It kind of is required. The good news is that in about 3 months, every single tenant is going to be pre-provisioned with a tenant shard anyway. So it's a technology that Microsoft are taking a big investment in, and we're kind of working with what's known as the substrate team here at Microsoft, where basically it's going to be enabled by default for every single tenant within the service anyway. At the moment, it's on a kind of provisioned on a per users basis, but that's going to pivot to a pre-provision for everybody going forward in a few months.
All right, great info. And here's an interesting question, I guess, kind of security related. So Paul's wondering, like, if somebody gets phished and they put in their credentials, where do they go, after they entered in on that sign-in page?
So they go.
We don't store those, right? We just kind of validate
absolutely,
them?
yeah. We don't even validate them. So to be honest, so it's one of the requirements we had from Sealer is that we cannot capture user passwords. So we don't. So you kind of, the moment they're kind of put into that text box on the screen and they hit submit, it's gone. We no longer have those at that point because we're literally not allowed to kind of keep those credentials. We may at some point in the future, when we want to start looking at chaining these attacks together, take a salted hash of that password so we can then go and start to actually try and chain the attacks together. But for the moment, that data is discarded and we do not keep it anywhere.
All right, very good clarification. And a couple of different people are asking around, is there any integration with Cloud App Security ATP? And I'm assuming the answer is no because we kind of bypass that. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah, because we do the direct injection, we bypass.
And I think you did mention briefly the license requirements, so that would be an E5 or I guess a standalone TI license?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So if you are E5, it's there, or alternatively, so it's an and/or situation. So you have E5 and/or the threat intel standalone.
Okay, yeah, and yeah, just I think there's a couple of overlapping questions. I think you covered everything, and want to make sure we have enough time for Nick. So thank you so much for joining. If there are any other questions around that, I'll get them answered. I'll get those to you, and we can respond to them offline. So thank you so much for the great content, Stu. It's awesome.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Cool stuff. All right, and moving on to Nick. Nick, if you could just take over presenting, that would be great. And welcome, and thanks for taking the time. And there's some new things that just got released. There's a new data privacy tab in the Office 365 Security and Compliance tab, and so you're going to take us through that. And I'm assuming you're also going to show us some stuff around the fulfilling a data subject request as part of GDPR. So welcome, Nick.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Good to be here. So I just brought up the deck. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yeah, it should be coming through. It's coming through here. Yep. Yeah, it's loading
Great.
now. So
great. So it's good to be here to share a little bit about things that we just announced. Before we jump into kind of the recent announcements on the capability that's new, just wanted to share a little bit about how we've been working with customers on the compliance capabilities in Microsoft 365 and kind of our focus on how they help you achieve continuous compliance. So what we've really seen is that with compliance, the business continuity is the outcome that organizations are looking for. And there's really kind of 3 work phases, if you will, that customers and organizations are embarking upon. So this phase around assessment, understanding what your compliance position is, then managing that, managing your data, managing your encryption and access control, and then being able to respond effectively and efficiently to regulatory requests, investigations, audits that might be going on. And so on the outer ring here, you see our capabilities that really map to these different work phases. And what we're seeing is that when you think about this as a loop or a system, you can reap benefits in the e-discovery portion or the response portion of work that you've done kind of in more of the management work phase. And data subject requests, which we're going to launch into in more detail, is an example of that. Because once you've gone ahead and classified your information, the data in your environment using data governance or advanced data governance, then you're able to actually respond with precision to a data subject request. So in the case of Office 365 content, in a lot of cases, it's probably employee content that a data subject might be requesting, and a lot of that content might not actually be relevant or right to give back to that data subject, as a lot of what they might have been doing and creation of data is actually part of their job. So to be able to classify and identify what is your PII or what is the data that's really relevant to a request can really help streamline your process and make it much more efficient and effective. So just wanted to set that frame a little bit as we jump into what's actually new. So we announced at RSA a few weeks ago that there's now a new data privacy tab within the Security and Compliance Center. And we should have enough time to be able to take a look at this. But really what we're doing is putting a bit of more of an experience around some of the GDPR work aspects that are related to your Office 365 environment. So of course you can use content search across Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, now including Teams and Groups. Groups has been there, but Teams is new over the last month or so. To find this content that's related to a data subject request that you might receive. As I mentioned, if you classify your data using these sensitive data types, we have over 80 sensitive data types out of the box, or you can create your own custom types based on keywords or queries, and then you can download those results for review before you provide those out to the requesters. So that's kind of the core nexus of how customers are managing their data subject requests. But if we take a little bit closer look at what we've actually launched, and here's a screenshot, there's a new data privacy tab within the Security and Compliance Center. And one of the kind of the principles we've had around this is that this isn't restricted to only some plans. So the execution of a data subject request in the Security and Compliance Center is available for all commercial plans, which is an important thing. And we're committed to enabling our customers on their journey to GDPR, kind of no matter what their plan is. And so what you'll see is some of these capabilities actually bring functionality into plans that didn't previously have this. So you should have probably seen in your tenant by now, it's available in preview, this data privacy tab. And so this brings together a few things, including a GDPR dashboard. And the GDPR dashboard has a couple of aspects, and one of them is tools to kind of get you started on your journey to GDPR. So actually provide kind of an outline of the different tools and capabilities that you should be aware of in Office 365 to help you kind of take some steps as you proceed on your journey to GDPR. And then we also have a section on resources to help you ramp on GDPR. So white papers, content, background information that if you're just kind of becoming familiar with it can help you get ramped in a relatively quick way. And then we also have widgets with insights into your data classification and other GDPR related aspects, and then access to your privacy related tasks. And so this is really this first step into bringing data privacy as a workflow into the Security and Compliance Center, and I think we'll see additional capabilities here over time. So now specifically for data subject requests, within that data privacy tab, you can see the GDPR dashboard and then the data subject request cases. We've actually created a workflow just around these DSR cases. So you have the ability to create a new data subject request using a pretty simple workflow, identifying who is the data subject that's requested the information, manage the status and the progress of existing DSRs. So you can see here there's a list of open DSRs that we have in the screenshot, and really understand kind of what's going on there. And then within that, the ability to, as I mentioned, create the new request, name that request, log a description for it, and then save that case to kick off the content search. And then you're able to choose locations and really refine your search so that, as I mentioned, you're not searching for the entire corpus of information related to John Doe or the data subject, but that you're being specific into which locations of the Office 365 service you want to include or exclude. You can identify which groups or users to target within your search. And then, of course, use other locations like groups, teams, and sites as needed to get to the right content. But you can also do things like parameters, so author equals so on and so forth, or excludes these other folks to give you that kind of really refined capability. So there's a set of conditions, such as keywords, date ranges, and compliance tags. And compliance tags really map to the labels that you may have implemented in your environment, so that if you've gone through and detected PII for a particular set of users or sites or locations, then you can use that PII compliance tag to refine your search. And then, of course, get to that meaningful, relevant information that you want to provide back to the requester, and then export those results. So there's a set of export options that you can choose from. At the phase of export, you have the option to enable deduplication for exchange content. So think of threading or near duplicate content. You can include or exclude versions for SharePoint files and get an estimate of that export volume. So what is that export going to look like? In a lot of cases, organizations are setting up process outside of this experience to review and manage and really make sure that the content being handed back to the data requester is kind of what's been requested. And so there's some level of process that usually is taken outside of this as well. And so that was just kind of the quick overview. I thought it would make sense just to open up the capability and show you how that looks. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Give me a second while I do that. And one of the things I wanted to highlight is, so this is the experience for data subject requests within Office 365 specifically. But if you navigate over to the Service Trust portal, we have a host of documents around the DSR's capabilities specifically. And so let me just open that up. And it looks like my screen's coming up. So that's there. And so the Service Trust portal is really kind of that front door, right? If you imagine, as you're well aware, we have a number of cloud services that will need to have processes around to enable GDPR. This is the place where you can get all of the information for across the Microsoft cloud on how to manage these things. And so, of course, the compliance manager is available from here. And then I can also jump over to the privacy kind of area that will give me more information on these privacy-specific commitments as a part of GDPR. So this is where you can get access to the data protection impact assessments. This is where you can get kind of your one stop for understanding how to execute data subject requests, and then learn more about the data breach notification capabilities that are there as well. And within the data subject requests, if I jump into that, I get some FAQs, so some top questions. I get some documentation that is across the Microsoft cloud. So you can see here that I've got Dynamics 365, I've got Azure, I've got Office 365, and Windows. And so this really gives you that one-stop shop. And then I've got a host of tools that I can connect into. And so the tool that we just kind of looked at in the slides is the one that's homed within the Security and Compliance Center, specifically for that core Office 365 content. And I can navigate there quickly and authenticate in. But I also have the capability around the right to be forgotten, so forgetting user data and using how to use the Azure Active Directory Admin Center as a tenant admin to delete that data from AAD and the related services. I also get an option to understand the Microsoft system and generated logs and see what data is relevant to my users there. So you can actually do a log export of the Microsoft data, and then also as well for Azure. So understanding the system generated logs that have been created by the Azure data log and export that in that capability. So I wanted to highlight that really the front door of the Microsoft Cloud GDPR readiness and resources and capabilities is the Service Trust portal. And that Office 365 content and data subject requests is really specific just to that Office 365 content. So then quickly jumping into my environment here, I wanted to just show this is a demo environment. I was clicking through it a minute ago. It was taking for a moment for things to load, but wanted to show kind of how this looks. So of course you're probably familiar with Security and Compliance Center. There's permissions where you can give the right people access to this in your organization. And we have this new GDPR dashboard. So here we're looking at tools, and then we're looking at ramp up as kind of these top level items that we're providing. And if I open this GDPR toolbox, I can then see we're actually starting to show you a little bit of everything that Office 365 can provide. So we highlight the import data capability with some quick links off to learn more, finding that personal data and some pieces there, going through the auto application of labels, a disposition label, using Compliance Manager, protecting that data, so creating this DLP policy, applying cyber threat policies, and then getting into monitoring and responding. And this is where we have respond to DSRs, and this will take you into the DSRs capabilities, specifically e-discovery, label usage, alert policies, pending dispositions, report, and service assurance. So really trying to give you a little bit of in addition to what we provide in the Compliance Manager around controls and implementations, a little bit of a place to understand what capabilities are related to GDPR and which give you a starting point for your journey into GDPR. And then if we look at the ramp-up capability as well, this gives you just a high level. Now, most organizations are already well down the path of understanding what is it and how Office 365 can help, but this gives you some links to resources for someone who might be ramping up on it or relatively new to the capability. We have FAQs, but we also have videos highlighting some of these capabilities. And this one here, introducing Office 365 data subject request, actually provides a quick demo of the data subject request capabilities, about a 5-minute video. So really trying to bring some of those learning and awareness assets right into the product experience. So you can see some articles and related portals, the Service Trust portal, as I mentioned. And then from there, we get into a little bit more around activities or actions that you're going to want to take. So we give you a link into creating a data subject request. You can see the activity, active and closed. This is a demo environment, so you can see we just got a couple that are active. We also give some insights into labels trend. So how are labels being proliferated in your organization? What are the top labels that are being applied? And then gives you some more information on risks and threats. And this is an area that we're going to build out more over time as we bring in some notifications, breach notifications capabilities. As I mentioned, it's in preview now, so this is something that we're going to harden as we work towards the end of May. And then jumping into the data subject request specifically, this is where I can create this new data subject request, manage these cases, understand kind of when it was created, modified, who's been modifying it. And it's really a simple workflow, gives you a similar look and feel to some of the other workflows. In fact, even what Stu recently showed us. But I can kind of set this up and say this is going to be the John Doe DSR, and I can put in a description, employee that used to work here, data subject request. And then I can, fill in who's actually filing this request. In this case, see if I can get that to take. Oh, there we go. So let's go ahead and set this even. So I said John Doe. We'll do John Dieters since he's a user in this environment. And then I can go ahead and save that case, and this actually kicks off that search. So then I can see we'll look for data in Exchange and public folders, Skypes and Teams, to-do tasks, my analytics. So it gives me a sense of where we're going to look for this, and then get into those search results. And from here is where I can start to refine and add some of these conditions and these capabilities. And so for the John Doe DSR, this already gives me some keyword-based refinement. So I can see here that it's participant or author or created by my data subject. And it does take a moment to return that search. And I can also see what's included in my capabilities here. I have the option to choose specific locations or to go across all locations, and I can also add my conditions. And so this brings up my conditions tab, and here I can say, is it a date range, a subject title, a particular label that I want to search within, and you can see there's a pretty good list there of what's available, and we'll just let that run. And as that comes in, what I get is kind of a view of those results, the ability to refine those results, and then go into the export capability. So that gives you kind of a quick sense of what we've launched for the Office 365 content specific portion, I do want to just, again, emphasize that for the overall right to be forgotten, DSRs, and these capabilities across the Microsoft Cloud, your Service Trust Portal is going to be the location to get a handle on that. So that was the kind of the update I wanted to share with the group. At RSA, there was a number of announcements in this space. I can share the kind of the blogs that were related to that with Michael as kind of a follow-up, so that you have the content, you have access to the videos. Another piece that was related to this that we launched is around event-based retention. So in the data governance and information governance space, triggering retention and deletion policies based on certain events. Could be an employee departure, a project close, and then setting a policy against that content based on that particular event trigger. So that's something else we can just mention quickly to make sure that you're aware of.
Great stuff, Nick. I love the search capabilities and the refinement and being able to refine by like even compliance tags. So theoretically, if you've done a good job, either manually tagging or either auto-applying labels, you can search on those specific labels. It'll just kind of bring things up. I tested this out. It works great. Everybody can try this in their Microsoft demos, demos.microsoft.com, and grab one of those tenants and try this stuff out. And I also like the inline education. That's really good. We have a couple of questions if you got a couple of minutes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So first of all, a lot of positive feedback. Partners are seeing that this can be very valuable, and you manage the Service Trust Portal. So this is kind of related to that in terms of going across the different cloud services. So the question is, does this work across Dynamics 365 as well? Are there any integration apps with apps that include like SQL Server or custom apps in Azure? And my guess that a lot of it would be depending on how you have your search index set up and what it's actually crawling, or maybe you have a comment around that.
Yeah, that's right. So for now, the experience that we looked at is specific to Office 365 content. And so it's kind of that core list of apps that we talked about, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Groups, Teams, To-Do is there, My Analytics is there. As you're aware, there's more apps to Office 365, and so there's actually documentation on how to get at those long tail of apps. Dynamics 365 is outside of this for now. I think what we will see over time is that as we evolve into Microsoft 365, you'll see that the Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center is going to go across your Windows assets, your EMS assets, and your Office 365 assets. So you will see an expansion. I don't think that even at that time, Dynamics 365 will kind of be in scope for that authenticated admin search experience, if you will. However, we will be providing documentation and tools in some cases on how to do that. So for now, Dynamics 365 is kind of out on the side. There might be some alignment there, but you can see here that it's included in kind of this overall documentation. And the Service Trust Portal is really about kind of the Microsoft Cloud all up. So that's where you'll see everything that you need around the all cloud, Microsoft Cloud services.
Thank you. And question, I don't know if you can answer this, but what happens to the files in SharePoint that have been created or modified by a user that has been asked to be forgotten?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an interesting one. In a lot of cases, that's up to the organization. As you're probably well aware, a lot of what we're doing as employees of these organizations is actually property of the organization, not necessarily personal property. So that's where an organization will have to try and define the line of what is okay and kind of relevant under that right to be forgotten. Because if you've contributed to SharePoint sites, group documentation, etc., that might not actually, you participate in that as an employee at will with the organization. So there's going to be a bit of back and forth there. Now, I guess our focus is to provide the tools so that the organizations can execute whatever their kind of process decision has been around that. But that's something where organizations are, setting up kind of an intake process, an evaluation process, then they can use our tools to execute, and then maybe a review process to say, hey, these things are going to be, forgotten or are going to be exported and deleted, but these other things are not because they're important for business continuity, organizational confidential information, could be IP related, so on and so forth. So there's a whole set of kind of organization process and policies that needs to be put into place over the top of these tools.
Yeah, makes sense. And what about licensing? What kind of licensing do people need to use the GDPR dashboard, and does it support RBAC?
Yeah, so it does support RBAC, and right now the licensing is it's for all commercial plans, so including the business plans as well. And so you'll get this as a part of your E1, E3, E5 subscription. We're looking at creating a DSR admin role specifically. It's not there yet, but it's something that you can send feedback on through the feedback tool in the preview. Right now, it's the RBAC is around an e-discovery manager. The capability is built on the e-discovery content search, as you might imagine,
Yep.
and so it inherits those same permissions for now.
Okay, and this is maybe a little bit broader around the compliance manager, which is also an excellent tool related to GDPR and other compliance as well. Is there any PowerShell support for the compliance manager, or maybe any of the tools you've been showing?
Yeah, so a lot of our tools are backed up by PowerShell, and you can execute a lot of the tasks within the Security Compliance Center through PowerShell. We have some documentation on support.office.com to help with that. On compliance manager specifically, I'd have to understand a little bit more and potentially bring in that team to answer that. So that might be something we follow up on. And I guess I'd be interested in what you were trying to accomplish with PowerShell as related to compliance management.
Okay, we'll see if we get a follow-up there. And are the activities in the compliance manager audited in the SEC audit logs?
That's a good question. I don't believe that they are. So what the compliance manager does is gives you a place to capture your controls that have been implemented by both Microsoft. So there's a set of controls that are implemented kind of out of the box on our side, and then a place for you to capture your test plans, your implementation details across the customer-owned controls. And so that's things like implementing labels, implementing a DLP policy, so on and so forth, as related to a specific regulation. That is all captured in the compliance manager and available for export into an audit-ready Excel spreadsheet. Now, whether some of those activities would be captured in the Office 365 environment, for example, if you're setting up a DLP policy, we understand when that DLP policy took place, but not all of them. So I guess it depends type of answer, but it might be a great area to follow up on further.
And let's see, there's a question around more details around the events-based records management. I know it was mentioned in the All Up blog announcements, and then
Yep.
I'm pretty sure I read there was a detailed, I think in Docs maybe, there was some documentation around the events-based records management, yeah?
Yes. So if you jump over to and I'm just navigating here a bit off script, but if you jump over to the tech community, this is a place where we put a lot of our blogs and capabilities, and hopefully